Good to go. Okay. So anybody that wasn't here for the last lecture, we're all here for the last lecture, I don't need to introduce myself. What we're going to be talking about in this lecture is demand management, and it's quite an interesting topic in New Zealand. It's also an interesting topic worldwide because there's major changes in demand going on around the place. So we're going to talk about just the context, the New Zealand infrastructure strategy, population and demographic change within that, and migration from climate, and then what impact that has on assets. We've seen that. So what we're doing is we're doing this one here, future demand. It's one of the three major drivers of the feed into lifecycle management. It is something that you need to understand if you're doing any sort of asset management. It's something in New Zealand, particularly at the moment, that's changing quite dynamically. Way back in 2022, so 4 years ago, the New Zealand government, and we had a thing called the Infrastructure Commission, Te Wahanga, produced the New Zealand Infrastructure Strategy. Myself and Roger Fairclough, who you may, I think he's still lecturing on Lifetimes, were both on hot review team for this particular strategy. So they drew it up and then they put it out to industry to say, hey, we missed stuff, so what we were talking about in the last lecture, and so we were able to feed back into that. It's a good thing to read if you're thinking of getting into infrastructure management, because it covers the big picture for New Zealand in terms of the infrastructure that we have and the gaps and the problems that we have coming up. So that's the table of contents for the infrastructure strategy there. Provides a vision for infrastructure for New Zealand, why we need to change, how we're going to do it, about partnerships, and what we need for New Zealand to thrive and a world-class infrastructure system. One of the things that's a bit interesting in New Zealand, we're still growing quite rapidly population-wise as a country. However, some of the commentary in the media, you would think we're done with building infrastructure and we're there, and we quite clearly aren't. But we have an ongoing, I guess, two sides of the debate as to what the way forward would be. Our infrastructure, these slides are all just screenshots from the manual, but the average Auckland commuter spends 5 days a year in traffic. I'm assuming the average Auckland commuter has a fairly good playlist on their phone, spending that much time. We need about $90 billion over the next 30 years to fix up our water systems. So like $3 billion extra a year, which is, we're a $400 billion a year economy now, so it's not horrendous. It's a bit under 1% of GDP a year, but it's still a reasonable amount of money. I'm sure you're all well aware we're well short of houses and continue to go stop-start. We need a major increase in electricity generation capacity. This is the interesting one, we're going to dig into this. So we're currently 5.2 million people as of right now, and the official projection is that we'll grow another million. That I think is going to be well light of what we actually will end up with. Half the population growth will be in 5 centres, Auckland being main. So it's Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Wellington and Christchurch is where all the main population growth is occurring. We're getting older as a population, so that's that baby boom retirement. We've got sea level rise, because like most places in the world, a lot of our cities are on the coast, so sea level rise is going to have impact on assets. Alpine fault, which runs along the whole of the South Island that I live not that far from it. There's a reasonable probability it's going to let go in the next 50 years. It's got about a 300-year return cycle. There's been a lot of study on it, so and it would kick up about a 4-stage earthquake on the fault, which will cause substantial damage. So We need to spend about 60 on renewals to every $40 to spend on you. So we've got a big renewal hump coming up, particularly in pipe infrastructure. Construction costs are going up, and that comes back to what I said in the last lecture, we're short of people. So we're short on materials as well. So all the inputs into construction are in short supply, and very basic economics says if you've got more demand than you have supply, then the price goes up. So that is what's been happening. And we have day-to-day just construction workers. We're 120,000 short by 2024, which is now. Have you noticed 120,000 construction workers coming to New Zealand in the last 2 years? I don't think so. Maybe there's been 10 or 20,000, so maybe we're only 100,000 short now. But we don't have enough people to build the stuff that we need to build. We don't have enough people to project manage it. We don't have enough people to design it, and all those sorts of things. So we've got some good challenges. What the Infrastructure Commission did, and they had this report by Sense Partners in 2021, is they said, look, here's all the things, and it basically equals 10% of GDP, or $40 billion a year, as it now is. And can we afford that as a country? And the answer is no. We've been running about 4 to 5% of GDP for the last decade or so, or a couple of decades. So the actual need is about double what we've been doing to stay on top of the infrastructure challenges. Hence the big debate at the moment is you'll be seeing in the newspapers and things like that around how we're going to get there, how we're going to afford all that sort of thing. So what the Infrastructure Commission said was we can respond by making better use of existing, by better project selection, by being a bit smart about how we fund and finance stuff, by streamlining delivery, so better alliance type contracts and things like that, and get some of that cost. So the way that we're procuring, the way we're building, the way we're financing isn't optimal and perhaps isn't anywhere as smart as it could be. So get the price of it down and get stuff a little bit quicker is what we're basically saying. We've got this tale of we've got a city story going on, and we've got a rural and small town going on. Auckland is absolutely dominating growth, and you guys will no doubt see that in the congestion and housing demand and all those sorts of things if you live here. Hamilton and Tauranga and North Island, Wellington, Christchurch, and then a little bit of growth down in Queenstown, but nothing compared to Auckland. So we have a very bad habit in this country of trying to come up with a solution that works for everyone. I.e., let's create a solution that works for Auckland and apply it everywhere else. It's irrelevant for the small towns and the rural areas. And so there's some, I guess, thinking in systems and maturity measured to have multi-layered solutions. Certainly we've got some decent challenges around Auckland. So we're going to just unpack what's going on with demand in New Zealand. The tech tools and techniques you're seeing here can actually be applied to any country. But we'll deal with New Zealand since you're here. So the first thing about demand and population projections is you're going to be wrong. So it's useful to know that right at the very beginning. So this is again from the infrastructure strategy, from Statistics New Zealand, who collect all the population data. And these splodges here are the best projections that they had at the time by the best academics and people at the time. And they actually, when you look at the black line, which through to about I think it was 2012 or whatever, the actual population growth bears no relationship to the actual growth, and that it's consistently been higher than predicted, apart from this little period here, and there was a major recession in that period. In 1973, so basically 50 years ago, New Zealand's population was 3 million. Okay, now it's 5.2 million. So we've grown by 1.78 times in 50 years. If we were to grow the same amount over the next 50 years, we'd be getting close to 10 million population. So the thing is, you can get, as an engineer, I'm not a population person, I'm not a statistician, I'm not a demographer. So I would, you go, right, I'll go and get the official information, I'll get stuff from Stats New Zealand, I'll get the council population projection, all those sorts of things. Because I need that to decide what growth we've got, what demand we've got, what assets we need. The thing that's fascinating about this sort of stuff is that it's always wrong. So how do you project forward asset building if you know that one of the major base inputs into your decision making is likely to be wrong before you start? It's not a good answer to that question, by the way. But I want you to be aware that you're dealing with uncertainty and that you have to do these bands of uncertainty. We typically then pick a median band, but this blue one, if this is a projection from 2004, there's 500,000 people difference between the median on that and actual. It's quite a lot of people and quite a lot of demand. Okay, so that's number one. Second part of population is demographics. And so this side here is New Zealand's non-Maori population, and we've got this bulge coming through. The retirement age is 65, it's getting bigger at this end. Sort of solid block in the middle, not so many 0 to 14. So what that says is we're having less children, the non-Maori population is having less children, people are moving up through, and people are living longer, so you've got more people in the retirement age gap. Okay? That's very simple. Maori population is you track the typical pyramid, straight pyramid, and you would see, I've been, as I said, I've been to the Philippines 2 or 3 times. And it's one of the things that hits you in the Philippines is the number of children that are there. There's just children everywhere. And that's your typical pyramid where you've got lots and lots of children and then they move on the way up through the population. Europe looks a lot like this. Japan, Korea and China are all starting to look like this more than like this. But in New Zealand there's 2 stories. There's the Maori Polynesian population which is this one, is quite different, a lot more young kids, quite different from the non-Maori Polynesian population. Okay? Just different family structures, different having more kids and things like that. And that will start showing up in the percentage of population figures as well. This is the getting older. So you can see that there was back here, we're getting a lot more growth of over 65. So that's just people living longer. But the interesting thing is that somebody who is a school-age child, there's a primary school-age child up to age 10 or 11, has a completely different services they need profile than somebody that's 65. So you're going to start getting, where there's older populations, they're going to want different services, maybe more hospitals become more important, old people's care facilities, parks, passive recreation, that sort of thing. We've got kids, you want more schools, you want more sports fields. So you get those sorts of changes or differentiation in service delivery based on population aging. Now, big story in New Zealand is that we've got very high immigration. In fact, our immigration in New Zealand as a percentage of population is currently the highest in the OECD. So the New Zealand media are manic depressives, okay, as an industry. They are forever looking for the worst news that they can find, the worst story. They will blow that out of all proportion. They will, if you only read the New Zealand newspapers and never go over New Zealand, you would probably draw the conclusion it's the worst country in the world to live in. And it isn't. I've been around a lot of the world in the last years, and there are different northern European countries are very nice, but they get a bit cold in winter, it would be fair to say. I've been to a lot of Asia, and there are nice places all around the world. New Zealand does very well. One of the things I've gone to the habit of doing is keeping a list of these international indices and where New Zealand fits in them, and I updated it just before this lecture like last week, and the last lot of rankings I had like the 220, 221, so the changes in the last 2 or 3 years. And you look at that and you go, okay, so we're top 10 in prosperity. This World Bank index is stopped at the 220 was the last year that it was done. This one here, you go, well, how is New Zealand number 6 around housing value? So a lot of New Zealanders own housing, the price has gone up last in a global sense. So we're number 6 there. We used to be second equal, least corrupt, we're now third. So I think it's Finland and Denmark that are less corrupt than us as a country. Where we struggle is the competitiveness stuff, talent attraction, because we're stuck out in the bottom of the world. My daughter, who is now 33, has worked up in the UK, and it's down at the bottom of the world, and it's a long way from anywhere. If you're in London, you can pop over the front for the weekend, or to Norway or to Iceland, and it's boring in New Zealand. Well, that's why I like it. But so on those, compared with a city like London or New York or something like that, or Paris, we score less on those. And it says the other change is the freedom index we went down. So the Cato and Heritage Foundation are American right-wing think tanks, just so you know where that information is coming from. And the fact that we locked down in COVID and did extremely well in the first part of that COVID response, they took that as a black mark against New Zealand because we restricted freedom. So hence we've gone backwards in the freedom index a little bit and in the economic freedom because we locked down in COVID. Living here, you might have said, well, that actually wasn't such a bad thing that we were looking after our grandparents and vulnerable people. So you've got to take these indices with a grain of salt. The only way I can explain the World Happiness Index that we've gone from 10 to 11 is that too many people are reading New Zealand's newspapers and believing what's in them, as opposed to looking around and going, this is such a fabulous country and there's so much opportunity and you're safe and all those sorts of good things. But because of this, if you remember, I have lots of friends and colleagues who have immigrated from China and Philippines and India and Sri Lanka and South Africa and places. And when you're sitting in a country and going, well, where am I going to go? Well, if you look at things like this and perhaps don't read New Zealand newspapers so much, you go, well, that's actually not that's okay, it's an okay place to go. I think one of the things, and this is good for all of this room, New Zealand is still a place where if you work hard and you do well, then you have opportunity. So you don't have, secret hierarchical systems behind the scenes where you can't, if you're a certain ethnicity or race or male, those boxes aren't there. Basically, you can do well. So, which is not true of every country in the world. So, I think people are going to keep coming to New Zealand based on this sort of information, but not based on what they're reading in our newspapers who continue to have a different view. The question, and it's because New Zealand is free, democratic, prosperous and safe, essentially. And again, we won't read that in New Zealand's newspapers. So a little while ago I asked myself, what would be the maximum population that New Zealand could sustain? And interestingly, so New Zealand is 268,000 square kilometres now. I feel that's mountains and things like that. But the UK is a little bit smaller than us and has 7 million population, 7 million, 69 million. Japan's a little bit bigger, has 120 million. Philippines, which has got heaps of islands, is only a little tiny bit bigger, has 113 million, and is predicted by 2030, by the way, to be 140 million. So they're adding 1.3 million people a year through birth rate, not through immigration. So you look at that and you go, New Zealand could probably sustain more than 5.2 million people, just as an outside guess. In fact, quite a lot more than 5.2 million. So I come back to this diagram, which is based on us getting up to 6.5 million by 2070, and I go, seems awfully low. This has real impacts in infrastructure provision, because you need energy, you need water supplies, wastewater systems, roads, houses, public buildings, schools, hospitals, all that sort of stuff is predicated on what the population is going to be. Our official population, and behind the scenes I am challenging key decision makers about some of this stuff, because our official information is well behind what's actually happening. So this graph here, the base orange line graph, is from a gentleman called Tony Alexander. He used to be the head economist at the Bank of New Zealand. He is now an independent economist, provides a lot of commentaries in the Auckland Herald every week on housing. He has a newsletter at Tony Alexander, a free one and a paid one. If you're interested in housing and just what's happening in the New Zealand market, it's a really good free resource, and he puts these sorts of graphs up. So I correspond with him occasionally about some of this population stuff, so I got my staff to put the 25,000 a year, which is what Statistics New Zealand say we're growing at. And Tony, I know, has already done some work that said, through this period we were 60,000 a year. Last year, 2023, we tipped 139,000 extra people into New Zealand, predominantly Chinese, Indians and Filipinos were the big three in terms of the numbers. Hard-working, intelligent, productive people, so welcome to them. But the question is this was boom one at 60,000. This is COVID, obviously. When you lock your borders down and don't let anybody in or out, you're not going to get much immigration. At the moment, everybody is saying, hopefully, no, this is just a post-COVID bounce, and it'll settle that down to 25,000. I don't think there's any chance of that whatsoever. So the only question is it going to settle at 50, 60, 70? And that's a matter of government policy. We don't have a population policy in New Zealand. So it's set on the settings for immigration. But I think when we go back to that, I think most people that can read can look that sort of stuff up and go, it's not a bad place to go. So we're going to get, my guess is we're going to get many people who live it. So, which will mean that we're going to be well above 6.5 million. The only question is that we 7, 8, 9, 10 million people. If you think about Auckland, just on its own, if Auckland's population doubled or trebled, you might look back at the traffic congestion now and think, man, it's so nice in 2024, You could get to the university in an hour with no trouble at all. So the really interesting thing about infrastructure and demand is when you get big levels of population increase, you need to put in really big, chunky, expensive infrastructure, rail systems, and water systems, and more housing and stuff like that. And nobody wants to pay for it in advance of the population coming, so you're always behind. And sometimes you can be decades behind. So Tony was gracious enough to allow me. I said, hey Tony, I want to steal your diagram and use it. He said, yeah, no, knock yourself out. So you're looking at an improved diagram as opposed to one that was just stolen. But anyway, the thing is, our official record keeping and projections had not accounted for that one. And now we're up here, and it's dropped off just a little bit in the last couple of months, but it hasn't dropped right down the head. And the February figures are out, and they're still up at about this level. So, your guess is as good as mine as to what the number's going to be. It is going to have we will be building a lot more stuff, I think it's fair to say. And that's how that plays out. So Stats New Zealand were working on 0.5% a year as a percentage of population. Over through to 2070 is 6.5 million. If it's 100,000 a year for 48 years, it's 10 million. And then we've got climate relocation, which is not factored into any of that. So Pacific Islands, particularly, are really vulnerable to climate effects. Bigger storms more frequently. Your ability to recover as a community goes down. If you get one storm every 10 or 20 years, a really big one, and it's the same in Asia, and particularly in the Philippines with the typhoons. If you get a really big storm or try and get hit by typhoons, Japan, that you go, okay, once every 20 years we can rebuild, life goes on, we have a bad period for 2 or 3 years while we get back on our feet. If you're getting one of those every 3 years or every 2 years or every 5 years, your ability to get back on your feet before the next one hits starts disappearing because you start going backwards and you never recover, you never get the resilience. That happens 2 or 3 times. People go, actually, I can't live here anymore. So where am I going? Am I relocating internally and now I'm sitting in somebody else's town, not my town? Or do I relocate somewhere that doesn't get as much damage? So that's climate relocation. How many that might be? Could be anywhere between 1 and 5 million people additional might want to come to New Zealand. So I'm sort of blending 8 to 12 or 8 to 15 million is a likely number, which is still a lot more than the 6.5 we're actually not planning for at the moment. So last year, 135,000 people came to New Zealand to live, which is lovely. Dunedin, which is the second biggest city in New Zealand, has 135,000 population in the greater Dunedin city area. So I looked up, as you can, and said, well, how many houses do they have? Oh, 48,600. How many roads? 1,000 kilometres, nearly 1,000 kilometres footpaths, 260 bridges, 41 paved steeples. Here's the interesting one, water supply. They reckon that they've got, I know they've got 3 more treatment plants that been to them, nearly 1,000 kilometres of pipes, 18 pump stations, 44 reservoirs, and 44,132 service lines. Now, if you were reviewing an asset plan, what out of that set of figures that we've looked at the moment would ring some alarm bells for you? I'll help you with this. Look at the house numbers and the number of water service lines servicing houses. Do we really think that there are 4,000 houses in Dunedin that don't have water supply? Because in New Zealand law, if you don't have a water supply, your house is deemed unsanitary, you can't live in it. So I'm pretty sure those 48,000 houses all have water supply. What I'm also pretty sure is that the Dunedin City Council asset management plan doesn't have an accurate count of the service lines. It's only 4,000 out, it's only 10%. But, so when you're reviewing asset plans, these are the little things you look for. You go, every house should have a water service line. By definition, different numbers. Wonder why that is. How embarrassing. That's all public information, isn't it? Well, Dunedin City. They do a reasonably good job, by the way. That's just, I don't know how they got there. One wastewater treatment plant, 600 k's of pipes over in gullies, so they don't need quite as many. 2 hospitals, 71 schools, that's right down to early childhood. A reasonable sized university that has like 17,000 people at it, 1 big polytech, a port and an airport. Fantastic. In the last 12 months here at Auckland, have you seen all those things getting built? For the extra 120,000 people that are living in Auckland? You would observe all 40,000 houses being built somewhere. If we were building a new port, you'd probably have seen it this year. So the answer is no. You haven't observed any of that. So what does that mean in terms of our assets? What have we done to our assets across Auckland by putting roughly 100,000 extra people into Auckland this year? You might have observed it with extra cars on the road. You might have observed it because you might know some people that are doubling up on housing. So the answer is we're using up capacity at a very fast rate. So all assets, when you put them in, you don't, they have extra capacity. Water pipes, wastewater pipes, housing, you can put 2 or 3 families in a house if you had to. So you can, I did some work a few years ago up in Solomons in another school, so running a morning school and an afternoon school. So they had so many kids in Honiara, they were running, you turned up at 8, at 7 in the morning, went from school to 7 to 12. That school left and another one using the same building. So you do things like that. But what we are doing in New Zealand, that's what we have when we've got 130,000 people. We put an extra 130,000 people arrived in New Zealand. We might have built an extra 5,000 houses in Auckland in the last year, over and above what we were already building, and we certainly didn't build any of all that. So we are absolutely using up our capacity. And so that more demand on the assets, they'll break earlier, you get more failures, you'll run out of capacity, all those sorts of things. So it's something to be aware of. Demand has impacts. You can use up capacity, but once you do, then there's some really big expensive stuff to provide more capacity. So migration. We're going to talk about migration and climate. This was Montserrat, 25th of June 1997. Big volcano. They knew it was going to let go. They knew it had a bad history of pyroclastic flows. And they actually had, I think it was French territory, they had armed police dragging people out of their houses who weren't going to leave, who didn't believe the volcano was going to blow up. And they had boats down on the jetties to get people off them. That is what happened to houses right through the town. That's a clock tower or a church tower. So if you were there when that let go, you were dead, which is why they evacuated everybody. You're not going back either if that happens, if there's a big volcano like that. So that end of the island is now they've got people at the other end of the island still living, but the whole end of the island where the volcano is you're not allowed to live in there. You've got to get a special permit to go in. So sometimes migration is through no choice, and we're going to see that, I think, out of the Pacific with some of the islands that get sea level rise and they're only a metre above sea level. If the sea is over your island, you're not going to be living there for very long. The World Bank, and this was from 2020, estimate there'll be 200 plus million climate migrants by 2050. Infrastructure resilience is one of the issues there. Frequency, I think, I talked about earlier, if you're getting a big cyclone typhoon coming through every couple of years, or every year, a real monster on what you call a super typhoon now, your ability as a community to rebuild just gets worn down to the point that you can't. Availability of water, if you're going to get sea overwash of your water lenses and stuff like that, you run out of fresh water. So then you're into desalination, but you need power for desal plants as well. In Australia and out through Asia and also in the Pacific, interestingly enough, you're starting in India, monsoon failure and stuff like that. You're starting to get a lot more heat, fires, drought, crop failure, impacts on people. And your ability to recover. So, coming to New Zealand, I think we could easily, there's 2.3 million people in Papua New Guinea alone. We could potentially see 200 to 500,000 climate migrants migrating into that problem into New Zealand. New Zealand and Australia will both be logical destinations, I think. Australia, late last year, this year, signed an agreement with Tuvalu, which is very vulnerable, saying that Tuvalu citizens can come down to Australia to live if they have an impact by climate. So, where it gets interesting is obviously in just about everywhere in the world, your customs and your history and your family stories and your culture are all tied to place. almost always. So if you get an entire group of, my daughter, my 33-year-old daughter's Spanish older, so I've heard this over the years as she's done her studies, but when all Anglo language and music is often all tied to a place. So when you have to move from that place, what happens to all of that? So there's issues with that, and I guess social issues as well, cultural issues. The thing is that it doesn't all happen at once. We can try and reduce emissions, assist adaptation, and open up legal migration pathways, but we're talking about something that's happening over the next 20 to 30 to 50 years. Up on the climate adaptation platform, I put a thing, there was a really good little short film about the Bangladeshi Delta. So there's a lot of people live out in the Delta, and they're right on sea level, and a lot of them are already starting to self-migrate up to Dhaka. So now you've got a lot more informal housing in Dhaka, because the Delta's getting big storms in every year now. People just, their houses and their livelihoods getting wrecked on an annual basis. Last year is refugee status, and I think the challenge for countries like New Zealand is going to be opening up these migration pathways to allow people to move ahead of trouble, because you don't want people moving at the last resort. Sometimes that's too late, and there's pretty bad effects. But this is something that's going to happen worldwide over the next, from now onwards. And one of the key things that Dr. Henry and myself involved is around infrastructure resilience. Yes.
A very interesting example is, I think we featured it in CAP with the Divided government having conversations with both Fiji and with Australia.
Yes.
For relocating the entire population.
Yeah. And it's not a big population, you've been up there, haven't you? Was it?
Yeah.
It's not a big population, but we're going to pick a whole country up and go right here in another country. That's a little bit more problematic for China and India, because they're really big populations, but you'll get a lot of internal migration in those cases, so people will move out of the river deltas in the first instance. So here's a big long list of things that impact when you get high population growth: housing, schools, medical facilities, transportation. I'll put the red highlight on energy, telecommunications, water, wastewater, stormwater, parks and recreation, ports, airports, shopping centres, community and religious facilities. So all those things, if you've got big population growth, all need to grow with them. Energy is one of the things that underpins the whole lot. Okay, we just take for granted that we've got, there are countries around the world that don't have reliable energy supply, that have rolling blackouts and things like that, and it really does impact your economy and all sorts of things. And I don't know if you remember a bit earlier on the slides, New Zealand is on the 6.5 million population. Where was there, wasn't it? Where was it? Energy generation capacity needs to increase by 170% to meet 6.5 million population. So we have a really big energy deficit coming up in New Zealand. And we are behind in dealing with that. So when you have quite high population growth, you're going to be dealing with all those sorts of issues. So when you've big agencies, and I've been quite a few of them, you end up with, and same in Western Africa. Interestingly, like even saying some of the towns in the Pacific, you end up with informal housing around the cities because people pour in because it's a safer, there's opportunities and things like that. So you end up with essentially housing, schooling, medical all drop onto that because you have a lot of population there you don't know about. In terms of coming back to hard assets, impacts around inundation and flooding are the biggest, most likely ones. Certainly in New Zealand, flooding was our biggest issue. Those of you who were here in Auckland a year ago, or just over a year ago, will have had some observation of that. More flood protection, more sacrificial assets, perhaps not building houses and stream beds. Some things that we can do about that. Managed retreat, so when we had the Christchurch earthquake, we came up with this red zone. So if you fly into Christchurch now, you can see there's areas where all the houses are gone, but the streets are still there. So they are the red zone areas out onto by the sea on the east of Christchurch. So the thing with red zones is that, hey, this area is just no longer safe to live in, everybody knows. That has knock-on compensation issues and insurability. At the moment in New Zealand, and there are insurers are starting to refuse reinsurance in places that are along the coast. Now, in New Zealand, in theory, if you've got a mortgage, you're supposed to have insurance. And I'm not sure that everybody does, but the banks are trying to protect their mortgage, obviously. So there become quite immediate knock-on economic impacts if an insurer says we're not going to insure. In the US, particularly in Florida, where they're getting a lot of flooding, and over in California and so Arizona, where they're getting a lot of wildfires, the main private insurers are going, no, we're done. We've paid out too many times. And they have these insurers that are run by the state as an insurer of last resort. And there's a recent article in the Economist magazine about that. And the example was some people, both in Florida and California, that previously had been paying about $2,000 a year for their insurance for their house. And the state insurer of last resort was about $6,000 a year for the insurance. So 3 times the cost of the insurance. So those are sorts of things that are going to start kicking on. You've got this shrinking town phenomenon going on as well, which is US Midwest, UK Midlands, Japan, East Germany. So the Japanese population is shrinking quite fast at the moment. Eastern bloc areas, Germany, and people are moving to where there's more economic opportunity. And so, in certainly in the US and Japan, they just say, no, that's it, that village or that town is now a rural address, we will not provide any services. Because there's no point replacing services when there's nobody living in the town anymore. So, so the delivery of services, we might end up just going, hey, we're only going to be providing services in this place for another 20 years. So it changes what you build. You're not really going to put an asset that lasts 200 years into a town that's only going to be there for 20 years. Well, you should. And then on the other side of it, and Sandika, who is a lecturer, senior lecturer here at Auckland University, has a whole lot of work that she's done on Build Back Better, which is you lose something to climate, to a big event, don't build the same thing back. And this is Einstein again, one of the definitions of insanity is to do the same thing again and again and again and expect a different result. There's Einstein's definition of insanity. So, have a look, have done some pre-planning. So, right, hang on, if we lose some assets to a big event here, what are we doing? Are we moving them off the coast? Are we using a different construction methodology? Are we building something completely different? So you put the same thing back in the same place with the same materials, it is likely you're going to have the same result again. And if you're doing that every couple of years, that's going to be a big waste of money and quite frustrating. In a lot of places, natural ecosystems have been ripped out, and a lot of those provide buffering against storms. So particularly mangroves. So I think we're going to get back to rebuilding natural ecosystem buffers. So what I'm trying to say, to a room full of engineers, hard engineering isn't always the answer. Sometimes buffers or soft green stuff does a better job. as amazing as that might seem to an engineer. And then climate adaptive design, flexible membrane roads. Up in the top end of Australia and some of the north of New Zealand, where they do get big storms coming through, they have these marinas that have floating pontoons and massive big poles that are 4 or 5 metres high. And so when you get a big storm coming and a big tide surge, the marina just floats up. And as it goes down, it floats back down again, so it doesn't get wrecked. So this is the sort of thing where you're starting to create stuff that can move around a little bit, but will still be okay after the flooding event. And there's just a massive amount of work to be done around buildings and roads and footpaths and that sort of idea. A lot of it's early days. We're going to try and feature as much of it as we can on the climate adaptation platform, but everything's changing. So hard surface designs are probably not where we want to be if we can help it. When it comes to estimation planning costs around the sort of both climate demand change and people demand changes, you need to build in as much flexibility and model use as you can. You need to consider different costs and scenarios. We're probably going to start looking at coasts and rivers a little bit differently. In that light on the coast or light on a river might not be the best place to be, especially if you're getting really big storms barreling or coming down flooding. We're going to have a much more variability of outcomes around rain events and things like that. Water becomes very critical. So the good news for New Zealand is we're water rich. Bad news is we waste an awful lot of it all of the time. But yeah, like in Australia where it's getting hotter and hotter, and my daughter's just been up in India and saying it's very hot there. She enjoyed going up to Kashmir because it was quite cool up there. So the when she's down on planes, she's like, oh man, it's hot. So yeah, when it's hot, you need water obviously. And the thing with water is that we're going to have to get it from longer distances and more of it, so we expect it to be more expensive. And much more integration of sustainable design and doing the modelling and the planning and the options development around it, which again is going to keep all of you in very productive careers. Scenario development. When you've got this much uncertainty, I mean, if there's a key message in this set of slides is nothing's certain, and the future is definitely not certain, and there's a fair bit of uncertainty and variability coming, and so you just need to be aware of that and to design and work your way through that. Understanding when you need to do investment, what the trigger points are for that. Understand the impacts of long-term underinvestment, because I joke about this with the Americans when I'm lecturing to them. I said, in New Zealand we're always looking for somebody else to pay for our stuff. I said, I'm sure that never happens in America, and they will laugh politely, because of course it happens in every society where you want somebody else to pay for your stuff. That's the game. But we're particularly good at playing that game in New Zealand. We want central government to pay for it because they have a magic money tree that they print and it won't affect their taxes at all ever. Or we want some other suburb or some other town to pay for things. Anyway, what happens is you get this long-term underinvestment by doing that game because you're trying to get somebody else to pay for your stuff and the costs go up over time. And then you've got impacts on everything, essentially, as we grow, but also as we start, the impacts of climate change start hitting more and more. And we come back to this, we've got to get a whole lot smarter about how we deliver services, how we deliver construction, how we plan and build stuff, the flexibility we build it with. I don't think New Zealand's going to spend 10% of GDP on infrastructure. But our GDP is going to keep growing as we grow as a country, so with population. So there will be a meeting in the middle somewhere. But affordability becomes a key issue. But then if we're going to go from 5 or 7 billion a year to 15 or 20 being in a year. Who builds it? Is it built to the right standard? All those questions are there. Some resources. New Zealand Infrastructure Strategy, I gave you the link for that back one earlier in the slides. Councils have been required to produce future development strategies. Some of them, so the Auckland one's just for Auckland. The Dunedin one that I've referred to is a regional one, so it's not just Dunedin City, it's the stuff around. There's spatial plans around. There's a guy called Paul Spoonley, who is the distinguished professor from Massey, who is our preeminent demographer in New Zealand. He's written a whole lot of books and a whole lot of papers and resources. So he's, I don't know if he's retired, but he's not lecturing in classes anymore, let's put it that way. But his stuff is really, really good, very well considered. We have the National Institute of Demographic and Economic Analysis down at Auckland University. And I'll give you the link to that. So those are all resources that you can tap into if you start digging into demographics. Every country has similar resources. When I was doing work for the Education Department up in the Solomon Islands, they have a statistics department that would produce a population projection that said Honiara was going to grow from 110 million to 300 million people. 110,000 to 300,000 in the space of 25, 30 years. And so I thought, wow, they're going to triple their population. I better, so I was in town, so I went and knocked on the door of the head demographer and statistician says, is this real? He said, yes. Everybody's coming in from the outer islands and going to be in Honiara. Honiara is on like this with a little narrow coastal plain. It's there because that's where the Americans landed in World War II and created a harbour. It's not a smart place to have a capital city, but there you have it. And I said, does everybody know about it? They don't. And he said, no, they just ignore me, they don't want to know. So I was working for the New Zealand Government for the Education Department. The Education Department had no factoring in that the population was going to triple, no plans to build new schools and all that sort of stuff. And you go, but when you go looking, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, there will be somebody that's producing this sort of information for that country. So, but this is the bit of New Zealand suffers. That is it. Are there any questions? That's a lot of information in a very short period of time that has basically told you that some fun times ahead. Yes.
Ross, can you talk a little bit about, because most of this demand and supply issue is around capital investment, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the balance between providing for demand while fixing the stuff you've built many years ago and some of the tensions around that.
Yeah. Okay. So old assets wear out and you have to replace or renew them. One of the things that happens when you have high demand is you're going to be building new stuff. And there's a real, it's an example around Auckland at the moment, is these big trunk sewer mains and water mains they're putting in. And they're putting in much bigger ones, much bigger tunnels and things than they used to, double or triple the size for obvious reasons. But what you don't want to do is forget about demand and go, I'm just going to replace like with like when I've got a major trunk asset or something like that. Same with roads. So you need to know, even when you're replacing assets, first up, do I need more capacity? And if I do, the time to up the capacity is when you're doing a replacement. The second is actually have to think about it before you, because if you go and put, let's say, a 600 diameter pipe in and you needed a 2 metre diameter pipe, the 600 diameter pipe's still going to be there and it's going to work, but it's going to be undersized the whole time. The other thing that we found out as a result of the Christchurch earthquakes and stuff in Wellington is that replacing old buried assets particularly is hideously expensive. It's a lot cheaper to put new stuff in. Same with roads. If you're building a brand new road, there's no traffic on it, there's no gun, you just get in there and do the job. If you're doing a road, refurbishing a road that's got a lot of traffic on it, it'll reduce the night work or diversions, and there's a lot of economic costs associated with it. So when you then roll extra demand and extra capacity on top of it, it gets to be quite interesting in terms of, I guess, just optimising the replacement cycles with the new stuff, and then also sequencing as well, so that you do stuff in a really optimal sequence.
Ross, just, I don't think that we've got any students here from Vietnam, but especially countries that's going through a significant growth and building era needs to start building the asset management, because it's easy when you start building new stuff to forget you've got to look after it at some point, right? So we've seen that in Vietnam.
Yeah, we're going to look at that this afternoon too, with some sort of short case studies, if you like, of big strategies, and I've got some from across Asia and also the USA. So where it gets really interesting in the American interstate system, which we are going to look at this afternoon, they started building that in the 1950s. President Eisenhower came back from World War II, he's the premier commander of Europe, and he said, yeah, the Germans had really good motorways and you could move tanks and army around real fast if you wanted to. And here in America we've got this terrible old railway system, road system, Route 66, that wanders its way across the country, and it's quite small, and we've got one railway. If we needed to get somebody from California to Florida, we'd never do it. So we should, as a matter of strategic priority for the country, we should build the interstate system. And so they did, but they sort of used defence and strategic money to do it. Everybody started using the American interstate. If you've been there on them, they're quite nice roads. They're now 70 or 80 years old. They're all concrete, a lot of them have bridges, they're all end of life, and it's now no longer a strategic imperative for America to build the roads. So it's come back to individual states. So you get this issue where you build roads for one reason, and the money came from one big pot over here, which is the American military budget is humongous, and then you use it for a few decades and go, we need to pay for it from money over here. Oh, we don't have the money. And in the case of the American interstate, bits of it are coming up for complete replacement, and they have this list, particularly bridges. A lot of their bridges are falling to bits. And every now and then they get a catastrophic failure of one, because they don't believe they have the money to fix them. Anyway, we're going to look at some other places that are building big road systems as well, which has been quite interesting. But that's just afternoon. That's for you to come back to us.